It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie Kay.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Onyx News. I'm your host, Margie Kay, and this evening we're going to have a little bit different show tonight. I do not have a guest this evening. We're going to talk about some of the most recent strange news, things that are in the news, and we are also going to talk about Ginger Rogers' ghost, which is haunting two of my houses. And the story behind that is very interesting, and it continues today, and just some recent things happened. So we will get to that. If you have a story about something that you'd like to share that's happened to you recently, whether it's a cryptid sighting or a UFO sighting or drones, balls of light, all of these things going on right now, please go ahead and mention that in the comments, and we'll discuss that on the air. So tell us your story. I'd like to hear about it. I have been getting a lot of reports lately from different locations all over the United States. There is just, I don't think anybody can deny that we are in some very, very high strangeness situations right now. Recently, I'm just going to go through a few of my most recent reports. There was a chupacabra sighting not too long ago here in Independence, Missouri. She said that her son and his cousin saw a chupacabra not far from Center Point Hospital in Independence. Now, this is an area that we call Little Blue Parkway, and the area across from Independence Hospital is wooded. There are lots of wooded areas and the Little Blue River. So that is close by. And this is what she said. She said it walked on both 2 and 4 legs. So sometimes down on 4 legs and sometimes standing up on 2 legs. She said her son and his friend saw one in Odessa, Missouri, over by the lake near their old house as well. They said it crawled on all 4s, and then it stood up on 2 legs and jumped over the fence. It had spikes along the back, brown short fur, and large fangs. They both thought they saw a demon, and it scared them terribly. She said her son doesn't like to talk about it. There was an article about this sighting in the Missouri Conservationist magazine, which explained that the creature must have been a coyote with mange, but the witness said coyotes don't stand up on 2 hind legs or have spikes on their back. So this is something, this chupacabra has been seen from South Missouri, going north on 49 and Old 71 Highway and some of the roads in that area, up near Rich Hill, Missouri, and then also near Lake Jacomo, where a few years ago I saw something that I can't explain. I don't know if it was a chupacabra, but it seemed rather large. It had, it was shorter in the front, walking on all 4s, but shorter front legs, and it went down at an angle. And this was at night. I was traveling with my husband. He was asleep in the car, and he didn't see it. Isn't that always the case? That always happens. So it was, like I said, shorter legs in the front. It had a long snout, but I didn't really get a good look at the front of it because I saw it from the side, and then it moved quickly in front of me, headed straight in front of me to the right side of the car off the road. And it was a mottled appearance, like black and gray mixture. And the back of it was a real boxy, larger back end that just didn't make sense with a long, flat tail. And yes, I know what it sounds like, but that's not the only time I saw that thing. I also saw it in South Missouri about 12 or 15 years ago while I was traveling with a girlfriend, and we ran into some very strange green fog that I had not experienced before. And we noticed something. The animals were just all acting very strange, very, very strange. And in fact, this was on 49 highway going north, and it's usually very busy. But on this trip, there were no cars. We did not see any cars for miles and miles, and while we were in this green fog. But the other thing was, we would see these animals. We saw a cat sitting in the middle of the highway that didn't move when we drove by. We saw a skunk sitting near the edge of the highway as we went by. Deer standing, not moving. We must have seen at least 12 different animals on the way back before we saw this creature that looked exactly like the one I just described that we saw at Lake Jacomo, or that I saw at Lake Jacomo. But in this case, my friend Donna and I both saw this thing, and it crossed the road in front of us. And it was the same thing. It was shorter in the front, long snout, big boxy back end, and a long flat tail. Black and white, mottled black and white. I did call the Missouri Department of Conservation and asked them what this thing was, described it, and they said, we don't have anything like that in Missouri. There is no animal like that. Okay. So whatever it was, maybe it was a mutation of something. I don't know, but very strange. Next, we're going to talk about a wraith, or that's because that's the only thing that I know to call it. I did mention this once before on this program, but someone else has come forward and said they saw one too. So what I saw, I was driving south on Chrysler, just past Truman Road in Independence, just after dark, and a creepy looking thin man wearing a hoodie was crouched down on all fours, and he crawled across the road on all fours. And then suddenly he stood up and he flew backward through the air to the middle of the road in half a second. He was just up and then back. Then he got down again, crawled once again, and then stood up, flew backwards. And finally, this happened 3 times. Finally, he stood up next to the road, off of the road on the sidewalk. I couldn't see his face. His arms were unusually long, though. I did notice that. I did keep driving. I did not stop. I did not get a photograph. I was in major shock seeing this. Never seen anything like it. I'd heard about it, but I heard about a sighting in Oklahoma, actually, from a woman who's been a witness to a lot of strange things. And so just recently, a man reported to me that he saw a creature like this that he first thought was a man that was crouched down next to the road in Raytown, Missouri. Now, Raytown is also a hotbed for paranormal activity, UFOs, and everything else has gone on there. It's a very busy place. But he said that he was driving home and he was near a street light. He was driving and it turned into his road to go home. Under the street light was crouched down something that he thought was a man, and then it stood up and it had unusually long arms. It was extremely thin. It had a hoodie on, but he couldn't see he looked directly at it, and he said there was no face in there. It was just all black. So whether there actually was a face or not, we don't know. But he said then, as he drove past, it jumped down and ran off on all fours. So if that isn't strange, I don't know what is. Okay, next, I'm going to talk a little bit about large black cats because they're back in the news. Recently I heard of a sighting in Colorado, and I heard of one in Iowa. But from 2009 to 2004, I received several reports of very large panther-sized black cats in Raytown, Missouri. Raytown again. And this, by the way, is just south of Independence. One witness said she was sitting on her front porch and noticed that the neighbors across the street had a new large black cat ornament in their yard. She thought that it was just like, one of those statues that you put in your yard until it stood up and walked away. She got up and went back in the house and won't sit outside any longer. She called the Missouri Department of Conservation, and they said there are no panthers in Missouri. You didn't see what you thought you saw. And then 2 people witnessed a large black cat about the size of a coyote walking along the sidewalk in downtown Raytown. And then, as they're watching it, it dissolved into thin air. So it was not 3D, or it was 3D and it phased into 5D. I don't know. The witnesses looked in all directions, but it was just gone. And when they called me, the woman called me, she was just in a panic. You could tell that she was just in shock about this. Also had a report from a man who lives near 63rd Street in Raytown. He said he saw a huge black cat running across the busy street late at night. He called Missouri Department of Conservation. They told him there couldn't be any panthers in that area. As far as he knows, they did not investigate it. And then, okay, so here's a good one. This is something totally different. In October of 2024, a woman and her friend told me they had recently been walking in George Owens Nature Park in East Independence, and as they were getting ready to head back to their vehicle, they heard a rustling sound in the woods and looked to their right to see what it was. Both women saw a 7 to 7.5 foot tall humanoid man with huge wings that were partially open. The creature stared at them menacingly. The women backed up and walked backward for about 20 feet, then took off running to their car, which was about 50 yards away. They kept looking back to see if the creature was following them, but it wasn't. The witnesses said they would never go back to that park. I have received several Sasquatch sighting reports from that area as well. So, as we continue with more high strangeness, I'm just going to mention again. Okay, so I've got, Carl says, while he was in Guam, a green frog would come in from the ocean and stop all radios from working. Now, that's strange. That is really odd. I've heard a lot about this green fog. One of the things I heard about, because I had a strange thing happen with a time anomaly a few years ago while I was driving to Omaha. And in fact, this happened twice while I was driving from Kansas City to Omaha on 29 Highway North. I hit a patch of green fog, and suddenly the cars around me changed. And there was a car behind me that I hadn't noticed before. It was an old-fashioned, like 1950s, 60s police car, probably 1950s. And he was following me. And I noticed a sign on the side of the road that said that this town was going to be in 1 mile. So it said whatever this name of this town was in 1 mile. But the sign looked very old. Super old. It was very strange. And so I'm driving, and 30 minutes later, approximately, I see that sign again, only this time it's a new modern sign, And it was actually where the town was. And the whole time that I'd been driving that 30 minutes, I didn't see that exit. Did not see that town exit. So I did pull off on that exit and I stopped to get some gas. I go and so I paid for gas and then I went inside. It's like it's not a Quick Trip, but it's a little convenience store in there. So I walked inside. There's nobody there. Not a soul in the whole place. So I turned around, got back in my car, and got back on the highway. When I did, there was no green fog. So I asked Fred Zooey about this. He's from Omaha. He's a UFO investigator, paranormal investigator. And he said he had heard stories from other people, one woman in particular, where she had missing time for, I think, about an hour and a half. She had missing time. And there was a green fog involved in that in Nebraska. So don't go to Nebraska. No, I'm just kidding. I actually think that this was in North Missouri or into Nebraska. I'm not sure exactly where. I'm going to have to drive it again because I had that same scenario happen twice while driving, a couple years apart. That is really odd. Sage says, I have seen it, but everything changed as in not the same as I had seen it before, like a time warp. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The green fog, I think, does some kind of a time warp because when I'm watching this police car behind me, it looks like 1950s. I think I actually went back to that time and just had an experience for a little while. Oh, by the way, I did end up at that meeting an hour late. And I was just driving the whole time. The only time I stopped was to get to that gas station. And I had left plenty of time to get there. So I had an hour of missing time. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Dawn, for liking my stories. we got more coming up. It's going to be fun. Okay. If anybody else has anything, weird that has happened to you, we're talking about cryptids, green fog, UFOs, ghosts, hauntings. We're talking about that tonight. And if you want to share your story, go ahead and post that in the chat. If you're listening on one of our stations, one of the digital radio apps, you might want to go ahead and jump on our YouTube show right now under NX Network, because I'm going to be showing some pictures here shortly. And so that will be very helpful. You won't get to see those if you're just listening on radio. By the way, I just want to mention this. We did have a problem with our Spreaker service, which is the distribution service for all of our digital radio. They actually just stopped doing live stream on January 1st and didn't tell us. So we had no notice. It was just gone. The stream was down. We had to figure this out, but we are back up on TuneIn. So you can go to TuneIn anytime you want to listen. And of course, here on YouTube. And we're getting a new service here. And it probably 1 or 2 days, we'll have that set up and we'll be back on your favorite apps. All righty. So lately as well, you're going to like this. Let me back up here for just a second. I've got to pull up. Yeah, there's a mysterious haze that occurred for quite some time, about a week, over regions of America, but other places too. A strange, thick, dark fog has engulfed areas in the US, Canada, and the UK. Authorities have given no explanation for this phenomena, sparking theories that it is a government experiment or emissions from the as yet unexplained drones. Social media has gone wild with theories, and people have reported becoming ill after being exposed to the fog. Over the past week, social media has been buzzing with reports of a mysterious fog that has enveloped large swaths of the United States, sparking concern that may be a part of a terrorist plot or government experiment. An array of illnesses have been linked to the fog, which has triggered an avalanche of conspiracy theories on TikTok, X, and other social media platforms. The panic initially emerged in the final week of the year and gained significant traction on social media on December 29, marked by a sudden surge in online posts. Numerous individuals reported detecting an unusual chemical odor, which they claimed was accompanied by influenza like symptoms. And by the way, I experienced that myself. Other witnesses say they had trouble breathing. A Florida woman reported after she encountered the fog, she began sneezing and soon felt feverish and had stomach cramps, and her eyes became puffy. Some people have dubbed their symptoms fogvid after COVID. A family in Colorado who had been experiencing sore throats, lethargy, and stomach upset initially thought they had food poisoning, but after seeing the many posts, it became suspicious that the fog was responsible for their symptoms. After the swarm of postings, people in Canada and the United Kingdom soon reported similar experiences after an eerie fog set in where they were. Several posts drew a connection with the recent spate of drone sightings in the U.S., with some suggesting that the machines may be dispensing chemicals into the atmosphere. A resident of St. Petersburg, Florida, said the fog left a toxic taste in his mouth that he described as super weird. Others said its appearance coincided with odd behaviors by their pets. A woman in Texas posted that her dog began acting strangely after being let outside, and then it kept sniffing the air. She also said her eyes began burning and she experienced a headache and stomach pain. Some of the media headlines appeared ominous. The Daily Mail proclaimed mystery as thick fog sweeps the U.S. with reports of burning chemical smell in the air. YouTube also perpetuated the scare with alarming videos, such as one from Tampa, Florida, which read, "Alert, strange fog, 4 days, weird chemical smell, sticky particles." Well, what a name for a YouTube show. Some media outlets, such as the Economic Times, contributed to the scare by reporting that no official explanations have been posted. One man posted, "This fog isn't natural. There's something off about it. Too dense, too controlled. I've seen enough to recognize patterns, and this feels engineered." It may be no coincidence that the appearance of the mystery fog coincided with the National Weather Service issuing heavy fog advisories in several states across the country. Much of what is being reported appears to be advection fog, which is common over parts of the U.S. during winter. It forms when warm, moist air advects or moves horizontally over a cooler surface such as snow, ground, or a body of water. As the air cools and reaches its dew point, thick fog can result. It's well known that water droplets in fog can trap air pollutants, giving it a chemical smell. Additional observers described respiratory difficulties. A resident from Florida detailed how her encounter with the fog led to a series of symptoms, including sneezing, fever, abdominal discomfort, and facial swellings. Okay, following this initial wave of reports, then events began surfacing in Canada and the United Kingdom, and I also heard some from Australia. Now, that weird fog, I believe, is pretty much gone now. But it was here in Kansas City for several days, and it was strange. It was very, very dark. It was like a heavy smoke rather than just a regular fog. And some people I know, were scraping some kind of a substance off of their car that it was, sorry, like a heavy ash. Sorry about that. All of a sudden, something's got my throat. Okay. We are at actually past break time. We're going to take a short 3-minute break and we'll be back in just a minute. Like I said earlier, if you have any weird stories that you would like to share, please go ahead and put them in the comments.
The Onyx Network classes and workshops are enrolling now for 2025. If you're interested in psychic protection, chakra balancing, dowsing, or perhaps healing with sound and music, visit onyxnetwork.com to see our complete series of live and on-demand classes and workshops hosted by the one and only Margie Kay. For example, in January 2025, you could spend 4 Saturdays with Margie for her exclusive live remote viewing workshop. Margie Kay is one of the most accomplished remote viewers in the world, and she will share her secrets and totally unique methods in this course. Some courses are open now. Seating is limited for these live courses, so register now at onyxnetwork.com. Onyx members use promo code XMEM for an additional 15% discount.
Tickets are now on sale for Rebels of Disclosure 2025, May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois at the beautiful Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center. This will be a 4-day event with 12 speakers covering topics such as ET contact, experiencer testimonies, lost history, secret space programs, time travel, Illuminati, parallel realities, and so much more. Visit journeytotruth.online for more details.
Debbie Ziegelmeyer is an experienced diver, dive trainer, and UFO investigator who has researched sites around the world that have water-related UFO activity. We now know that even the Pentagon admits that there are unknown objects in the skies and underwater around the world. Debbie compiled an amazing book to catalog many of these sightings. The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, a reference guide to UFO, USO, water-related activity, has received rave reviews by UFO researchers and the public. The book is available at Amazon.com. And we're back with Onyx News. I'm your host, Margie Kay. And before we move on to Ginger Rogers' ghost, I just wanted to show these comments from the chat. Fred says, this is in reference to what I was talking about a few minutes ago. He says, yes, my friend drove through the fog and then found she had a speeding ticket she found on her passenger seat. The ticket was signed by the officer, but she has no recollection of being stopped. Wow. And she was driving north on Highway 75 near the Nebraska-Missouri border. Wow. That was strange. Having a ticket that you don't know about. You'd think you would remember that. And then Don says the global fog, for instance, this residue in the fog is something like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. This is to reduce toxins in the body. I got sick, then recovered in 2 weeks. The residue in the fog? Wow. Okay. That's strange. That's even weirder. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's get on to Ginger Rogers' ghost, because I have not talked about this before on this show. And I thought I would go ahead and take the opportunity tonight to discuss this. So here's the backstory. And that is that a few years ago, my husband and I, we have a real estate investment company. He was out of town, and we had just decided we were going to be purchasing a new home and, for investment purposes. And I told my daughter, who she works for me, and just so she would be ready because she's our bookkeeper. So, if I write a big check, she needs to know about it. And so she came running down the stairs one day and she says, Mom, you have to buy this house. So she had looked online and she saw that the house where Ginger Rogers was born in Independence, Missouri, at 100 West Moore Street, was up for sale. Now, we had been watching the news. Anytime the house sells, it gets in the newspaper. So everybody knows who lives in Independence. We all know about the Ginger Rogers house that's always been privately owned, and nobody's ever been able to go in and look at it up to that point. And I said, oh, let me check into this. So I gave him a call, took a look at the house. My husband was out of town. And usually when we make a purchase like this, we consult each other. But I couldn't get a hold of him. So I looked at the house and I said, I made an offer and I put down a retainer right there because I wanted it. And the reason I wanted it is not because it was haunted. I wasn't even thinking about that. Even though I've been a paranormal investigator for years. I wanted it for the history and to save the house and turn it into a museum. One of the reasons is it's only 3 blocks away from the Vale Mansion, which is a huge open museum where people can go visit. So I thought this would be a really good investment. And so my husband got home and I said, honey, guess what I bought? He says, you did what? And I said, well, it's the Ginger Rogers house. He goes, oh, okay. That's good. Yeah. Well, over a year later, he finished restoring it and he did major oh, this is a terrible picture coming through. Okay. I'll give you the website, owensrogersmuseum.com. If you go there, you'll see some really, really nice pictures and our restoration process and the whole thing. I mean, it took a ton of work. The thing was falling down. There were split beams and just all kinds of things going on. So it was fully restored. We made it as much as possible to original condition with the woodwork, everything. And if it wasn't there, we put something in that was period appropriate, or really from that time period. All of the light fixtures were time period. The room where Ginger Rogers was born. I was standing there one day while we were just in the restoration process and nothing was in the house yet. And I was trying to decide how I was going to lay out the museum and what I was going to put in that room. And I thought, I'm going to make this look like a child's room in 1911, right around the time she was born. What would it have looked like? And I was standing there thinking about it when all of a sudden this foggy white fog starts coming up from the floor and forms into a shape of a woman wearing a long dress. And I looked at that and I thought, that is Ginger Rogers. She made herself known to me immediately. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. Ginger's here. So, and let me back up just a minute. We go back to the time where my daughter came down and said, you need to buy this house. And we were standing in my office discussing it. And as we're talking about, and I'm saying, should I buy this? Should I not? What would be the pros and what would be the cons? Pennies started falling down from nowhere onto the floor. One fell on top of my shoe. One fell in front of my daughter on the floor. One fell on one desk. Another one fell on another. There were about 5 or 6 pennies that just started falling down. And we're looking around. Okay, well, this is a sign because Pennies from Heaven was a song that she did in one of her movies. It's very famous. So that was the first ghostly thing that happened, but I really wasn't expecting anything else. So we got in there, fixed it up. We did a Ginger Rogers Festival in 2018. That was the grand opening of the house. And we had people come from all over the United States, Hollywood, California, Oregon, everywhere. And it was a big success. We did an all day and all night thing. And then the next day did a tour of the house. And nothing happened that was strange. at all. And then just a little bit of history in case you don't know who Ginger Rogers is. Here she is at 18 months in Independence, Missouri, doing her first pose for an ad in the paper. So she was working at age of 18 months. And here she is at 10 years of age. She sang at the Kansas City Club, which is a very exclusive club here in town. She got her start here in town. And then she moved to Texas with her mother. Her mother was a very famous woman in her own right, very successful. She was a Hollywood writer, and she taught actors. And one of probably the most famous is Lucille Ball. She had a studio on Studio Lot. She had a building, and she taught a lot of actors. This is Ginger, very young. By the age of 14, she had won the Charleston contest because she was an amazing dancer by the age of 14, let me tell you. And then she did that dance in the movie Roxy, and that is a must-see just to see her do that dance. I had no clue the Charleston was actually that complicated, but she made it that complicated. She was a huge hit by the time she was 18 years old on Broadway. And here she is in 42nd Street. She's very young. She's here on the right. And you notice that monocle she's wearing? That was her mother's idea. And they went with it. Her mother was her manager. She was a very famous dancer. Of course, most famous for Dancing with Fred Astaire. They did 10 movies together. She was, though, by far more famous than Fred was by the time they got together to do shows. But those are probably the most famous. She did 73 movies. And I don't know how many Broadway shows, plays, toured all over. She was doing theater work and sometimes working the theaters at night in New York and at night and then doing filming for films during the day. She had a lot of energy, extremely talented dancer and actress, and she was also a singer. And here she is. She did win an Academy Award. She probably should have won more than that, just that one. That was for Kitty Foyle, and that was a drama. Here she is later doing, in the 60s and 70s, she had a show, and she traveled around. 1962, she visited Independence, Missouri, and Harry Truman declared Ginger Rogers Day. It was his idea, and the city went with it, and it was a big, big deal. They had a parade. They had a talk. Harry Truman spoke, and Ginger and her mother's on the right here, both spoke. So I got the audio from that event, and the audio is not very good, but I got to hear both Ginger and her mother's voices. Okay. Well, of course, I had already heard both of their voices in some films. Her mother played her mother in The Major and the Minor. And so, anyway, I knew those voices. And I'm very good with voices, being a musician and tones. So I don't forget them. So there's a story behind that in just a minute. And here Ginger is a little bit later in life. That might have been at the Kennedy Honors where she was honored. We also purchased the house across the street, and we had that as a rental for a while. And then here's the Major and the Minor overlay. So what happened at the home? So I had several things, I was always working there. So one day I was leaving and I saw her sitting on the front porch of the house in the exact same place where she had been sitting for a 1942 Life magazine article. On the left side of the steps as you're looking at the house, she was sitting on the left side. Okay. And this is before the house opened. Then we got the museum finished. We opened the house. We started having tours, having people come in, and people were starting to report strange things. They would say, "Oh, there's a cold spot right here." And it was always in the same place in the room where she was born. And they'd go through and they'd say, "Yeah, this is really great, except what's that weird cold spot in that one room?" Okay. And then we noticed that I did bring in a couple of rocking chairs, and one of them was a child's rocking chair, and I put an antique doll in that chair. People would veer around it, going away from the chair, and my, manager would told me that she would watch people as they started going through the museum, and they would see that, and they would back off from it. It was just something very strange, just a little rocking chair with a doll in it, and so, okay, then somebody called me. She was an investigator for KC Paranormal. She didn't know who I was because I use a different name for my straight life, okay? I use my real name. She called me up. She knew I had purchased a house because it was in the newspaper. And she says, "You're not going to believe this, but I was just driving home from doing an investigation at the Vale Mansion, and something told me to drive by the Ginger Rogers house, so I did. And I got out of the car, and I stood there looking at it, and she said Ginger Rogers was sitting on the steps on the left side." I said, "Okay, this lady is for real, because that's exactly where I saw Ginger sitting." And I told her who I was. I said, I'm Margie Kay." She goes, "Oh my God, okay, I know who you are." And so we decided we would do a co-investigation on the site to see if it was haunted. And ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the best investigations I've ever done. We set up. There was no furniture in the place. We just brought in 4 chairs, 4 folding chairs just for that evening. My brother was there, and this investigator and her, someone who works with her. We set everything up, night vision, all kinds of stuff. Put a flashlight down. Long story short, we heard Lela Rogers and Ginger Rogers come through their equipment and speak. And not just single words. There were a few single words. There were some full sentences. And they said things like they were glad that the house was being taken care of. They were glad that it had been turned into a museum for both of them. And they were happy that everything was being taken care of, and they liked the museum. So this was very, very positive. The conversation with the 2 ladies was very, very positive. But then it started getting weird, and there were other voices coming through. There were male voices. And one of them kept saying basement and murder. And we're like, okay, something else has gone on here. Now, the basement, get this, it's a dirt floor. Guess what I'm not going to do? I am not going to go digging in the dirt floor, okay, just because of those things that came through. Those things were a little unnerving. And then, oddly, I have no clue what this was. A purple ball of light, about the size of a ping pong ball, I'm going to say, somewhere around there, came through the door, the front door, came through the room, zigzagged a little bit, and then went over to my brother who was sitting to my left. And my brother just put his hand out, and this ball of light landed right on top of his fingers. And then he moved his hand around, and the ball of light stayed there. And then I put my hand out, and it jumped over to my hand and stayed on top of my fingers. And then it went up and went right back out the door. Now, all 4 of us saw this happen. We all witnessed it. It was very bizarre. It was like a visitation from some type of a spirit coming in and saying hello. It was acting intelligently, but extremely odd. I really have never, I've seen balls of light, but I've never interacted with one besides that. That was weird. Okay, so things would happen with the dolls especially, and so we decided to open it up for public investigation, for investigation groups to come in. And I also did classes called Ghost Hunting 101, and then we would let people investigate. So one evening, well, the first one actually, it did this on every one, but on the first one, I had a group of like maybe 6 or 8 people and my assistant, and we were done going around checking EMFs and everything else. Most of the activity was in the room where Ginger was born. Most of it was around the doll in the chair. So we're all sitting in the living room facing the little bedroom when we see a little girl stand up out of that chair, and she was about maybe 3 or 4 years old, had a long nightgown on, and she walked straight towards us and then dissolved. All of us saw it. Every one of us saw that happen. There was some type of a spirit. I don't know if it was Ginger Rogers as a child, for sure, in that doll or in that chair, but there was some little girl there. We all saw that. And so then the next thing I did was I took the REM pod and I put it in the chair, or right next to the chair on the floor. Walked away. A few seconds later, it just starts going off like crazy. Every single light, every sound, everything went off. Now, you have to have something that would affect that area of the REM pod in order for it to pick up some type of energy. And there was nothing there. Nobody was near it, but it was going off like crazy. And it kept beep, 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 beep. It sounded like Morse code when that happened. I've only had that happen one other time, and that was at Board Camp Crystal Mine, but that is another story. So things like that. We had several investigations, and they would all turn out pretty much the same. The same thing would happen over and over again. People actually started seeing Ginger Rogers on the front porch, even though they wouldn't know anything about the history, and they'd say, oh, you know, she's standing right there, right next to that post, and that's the area where she would either sit or stand. Sometimes she would stand, and people would see that. So then I had the house across the street on the corner, turned it into a rental. I had a renter in there, and he started telling me that place was haunted. And I said, I really don't know if that place was haunted, because I went through there, I scanned it, I didn't feel anything. And, you know, before I rented it out, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't. But no, here it is. The renter said he started hearing noises, and they would congregate in one of the bedrooms. So he moved to the other bedroom. He moved to this front area right here in the front. And then he said one day he's lying in bed, and he doesn't know what woke him up, but he opened his eyes and he sees a man standing at the foot of his bed with half of his face gone. And I was like, oh my God. And so he says, could you please remote view this and see what's going on, because I can't sleep. I said, well, okay, let me see what I can tell. And I saw a car wreck a long time ago at that corner. And so that person's spirit had picked up that my renter was open, psychic, and just wanted to get some attention. But I was able to take care of that and get it to move on. I didn't feel like there was a big connection with the Ginger Rogers Museum, but that all of that land at one time, there was like 160 acres, was a big plantation. So there was probably a lot of energy going on, and most likely the male voices that we heard in some of our sessions were actually somebody from quite some time ago where things happened. So, okay, now we move to my office where I am now. Ginger followed me. She's there. Whenever I talk about her, I smell her perfume, and I don't know what her perfume was. I've got to find out because it is a particular nice floral smell, really, really nice, but it's not a perfume I know. It's not White Shoulders, or anything like that. It's something, it might even be specific to her. I'm not sure. But whenever we talk about her, that perfume smell happens. Now, the other thing that happens, I have been working on organizing all of her things, all the things that I had in the museum, things that I bought on eBay, collectibles, dolls, things like that, and organizing things because I do a presentation that's like a traveling exhibit. So I have to have these things organized, and I am selling a few things that I have duplicates of that I bought on eBay. So one of the things is this set of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers by World Doll, and they're pretty well known. I packed them up to get them ready to sell on eBay. And right as I finished, I turned around and walked away, and the chair that had been right next to these items flew across the room and hit me in the back. And I turned around and I see the chair, put the chair back. I said, "Oh, I see. Ginger does not want me to sell these dolls. She wants me to keep them." And there wasn't anybody else in the office with me at the time. I was completely alone, and that happened. Other things that will happen, if we mention her, talk about her, the lights will go off and on. And my assistant has seen that. Violet has been there in her room, will be standing there talking about something, and the light right over her desk will go off and on, and the rest of the lights in the building won't. It's very specific. If we go in the kitchen and talk about her, the kitchen light will go off and on. I mean, and then we'll smell her perfume. It's crazy, but Ginger Rogers is there. And I wouldn't be surprised if her mother wasn't there as well. I'll be writing about this. So you'll see more in the future. But hi, Ginger. Thanks for haunting us. And I hope things are great in the afterlife. All right. We need to wrap it up because we are at the end, and I wish we had a little bit more time. If you want to see some more pictures and want to see about the Ginger Rogers house and the exhibit that we have now, just go to owensrogersmuseum.com and you'll see more information on that. So, golly, yeah. We've had some strange things. High strangeness is going on in the world right now. Keep an eye out. Take a look at YouTube. You're going to see a couple of footages there of UFOs in the California wildfires. That's another subject I wanted to talk about tonight. Also, there was a dogman sighting just recently here in Liberty, Missouri, north of Liberty, and a Bigfoot sighting in the same area on the same farmland. We've got the gamut. It's just worldwide. The California fires are very strange. There's no doubt about it. There's just the fog that we've been having, the drones that we've been having all over the world, orbs, balls of light, nobody can explain. High strangeness everywhere. And it's a little overwhelming. It's difficult to keep track of. It's hard to keep up with it. But, that's what we do. That's what paranormal investigators do. And that's what we do here at the X. So just keep on keeping on. And Let me know if you have any sightings, you have anything that you would like to talk about, if you'd like to discuss. Let me know about your weird sightings. Send them to me at Margie Kay at unxnetwork.com or KUNXradio at gmail.com. That's another one. See you here again next week. Thanks for watching.